So welcome, Rebecca Gamble. So I'm really excited to have you on the Raising Alchemy channel. I've been wanting to chat to you about just basically your past and how you came about into your different modalities that you do. Raising Alchemy, one of the avenues that I really like to explore on the channel is people's experiences growing up with gifts, especially from younger ages. And I feel that if we can share the stories, your story, our stories of people, it will help people going, or our children going through that, to know that they're not alone, to be able to connect with people having had similar experiences, and just harbour a feeling that what they're experiencing is normal, and maybe give them some confidence to step into their gifts versus away from them. So Rebecca, you're an animal healer and communicator. You also teach a lot of different healing modalities. I've experienced your animal communication course myself, which was super fun, which was a year ago, actually, September in 2020. That was a long time ago, it feels, yes and no. And you have done quite a few one-on-one sessions with the different modalities that you teach. So we'll jump right in. Let's start talking, I guess, when you first started to be aware of the gifts that you have, because you have a lot of different modalities that you teach from and use, as well as the animal communication. So maybe you could just start talking a little bit around, how you kind of first knew that you had these gifts and how you've experienced them.
Yeah, okay. I mean, some of the gifts that I experience is that I see spirits, so I can see people who've passed over, and that I can telepathically communicate with animals. And I think when I was a child and when I was born, I feel like I was doing these very naturally. So my mum said that I would be in the cot and speaking to people that she couldn't see. And then when I was a toddler, I was doing the same. And I used to have animals as pets, and they were just absolutely amazing in the sense of they would follow me everywhere, and I would be able to tell them what I wanted them to do, and, you know, can you please do this? And they would just do it. And everybody was just in awe of how I managed to get my pets to do what I wanted them to do. And so looking back, I feel like I was naturally telepathically communicating with animals, which we all can do. But then I think as I got older and I realized it wasn't something that was considered normal in society to be speaking with ghosts, you know, spirits, or speaking with animals, I think I naturally started to shut down those abilities in a effort to fit in really with what everybody else was doing. And yeah, I feel like I started to basically made a real effort to keep my gifts hidden even from myself. So I became quite a workaholic, and I had 3 jobs, and I was working really early morning till late night, and that was my tool that I used to really suppress my psychic gifts. You know, a lot of us can kind of use other tools, such as drinking a lot of alcohol or taking drugs, or, you know, eating food that, you know, is not good for us. My thing was working. So I just really overworked. And when I got to 28 years old, I decided to quit all my jobs, and I decided to go traveling. I was going to take a year out. I actually ended up traveling for 5 years. But when I set off traveling, I'd gone from working from like morning till night, like, you know, such long days. I was even working weekends in nightclubs and things. So I had like no time to really deal with my gifts. And so as soon as I quit my job and went traveling, within like 3 weeks of being on my trip, so I went to Indonesia first, and then I went to Australia, all my gifts just rapidly awakened again. So I started seeing spirits. I was sleeping in dormitory rooms, and I was seeing spirits next to the beds of other people and being like, hey, that's my brother. Can you give him a message, please? You know, and I was just so overwhelmed, because I'd gone from living this kind of life where I really fit into what everyone else was doing. And then suddenly I was seeing spirits again. I was feeling kind of I felt like I knew things about people, but I didn't know how I knew them. And I was getting this kind of like burning sensation in my hand, in both my hands, whenever I was around anyone that was sick. So someone would say, oh, I've got this pain in my body, and I had this feeling of like my hands just kind of like switching on. Yeah, and I was having predictive dreams as well. So like every night I was dreaming really, really vividly. And then I would wake up in the morning and I would tell the girl I was traveling with, oh, I just had this dream. And then within the space of 24 hours, whatever I dreamt would come true. And my friend was like, what's going on? And I really didn't understand what was happening to me. It was really overwhelming, and it just came on so quickly for me.
Yeah, that's incredible. So what age do you think you're at when you started shutting these things out?
I feel like maybe around 7. You know, like children naturally can, you know, naturally we come in with all our gifts open, and, you know, so children naturally can speak to animals, they can see spirits. But I've noticed even in the children that I observe, once they get to about 7, that's when they kind of start to shut down. Children can even acknowledge their past lives. So we, you know, I work as a past life regressionist as well. And I've had children come up to me and say, oh, in a past life, I used to be this, or they'll tell me why they're scared of something connected to a past life. They're so open to that. But then once they get past 7, I've noticed that unless their parents have really encouraged them to stay open to that capacity, then they won't embrace it anymore.
Yeah, really, really interesting. And that 7-year-old mark is quite a common theme from people I've had discussions with as well on lots of different levels, from you know, energy centers and circuit counts and all sorts. The stats of those go down quite rapidly once they hit 7. And it's interesting because I am acutely aware of what's happening with my daughter, I guess, as well. You know, like I can see some changes, and it's more so sometimes I think influenced by societal conditioning, you know, the schooling and the structure, I think sometimes. And I guess you can just do what you can do. I just try really hard to focus on the mindfulness and meditation and nature and things. But I think part of these discussions that I feel are so really important is hearing your story and people's stories. If we can get parents listening to them, or, you know, teenagers listening to them, or young adults listening to them, it's really, you know, I just feel so passionately around just knowing, or people knowing, or them knowing that they're not alone, whether it's a parent with a gifted child who may not have felt that they were gifted themselves, and maybe themselves feel scared around the gifts that they think their children are experiencing, or someone who is really attuned to gifts themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the children that are being born now they are coming in with a lot of gifts, and I think the thing is to really not shut them down in it. So it's, you know, even though to us it might feel like, oh, that's really unusual, like I don't know what, you know, you don't know what they're talking about, but rather than saying, no, that's not true, that's not, you know, rather than shutting down their reality, just being open to what they're sharing. So if they're sharing that they're talking to the dog, rather than saying, don't be silly, the dog doesn't speak, oh, what's the dog saying to you? And just actually being open to having that kind of conversation. And I think if we treat our children more in that way, then they're less likely to shut down the gifts, because then they're like, it's more acceptable. You know, I think we're all brought up to believe that we have to fit into society in a certain way, in a certain structure. But if we can actually embrace the gifts that our children are coming in with and being like, oh, that's really interesting, would you like to speak to me about that, and not making it weird, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And then on the flip side, for someone like myself who has quite a lot of awareness, for me it's not making judgment or putting it into a box of what I think she might be experiencing either.
Yeah,
you know? So it's
open, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, really interesting. So tell me a little bit about your animal communication and those type of skills. Are they something that was that something else you shut down, or was it something that you felt you kind of always connected with? And yeah, some of your experiences, that would be really cool as well.
Yeah, okay. I do think it's something that I've always done. So like I say, I feel like I had that ability when I was a child. And then when I had this awakening at 28, I went on a journey where I was really opening up to these different things. And I was doing a lot of reading I started doing a lot of reading about mediumship to begin with. That was what really fascinated me. And then I did a lot of reading on past lives, and I was kind of doing all this exploration on the gifts that I had, because I didn't really have a mentor or anyone in my life that was kind of guiding me in how to deal with these gifts. And so I kind of went on a journey while I was traveling. I went on a journey of like 5 years where I was kind of visiting these different sacred places on the planet and receiving activations. And then I was guided to train in different modalities. So I trained in past life regression, Usui Reiki, And then I trained in angelic Reiki, which was when I got back to England. I trained in angelic Reiki, and that's where I'm from, England. And that's when my animal communication really opened up again. So that's when I really realized I could speak to animals, because I just received the 3rd and 4th attunement in angelic Reiki, and I was sat in my angelic Reiki teacher's kitchen, and there was no one there. And I just remember being sat there on my own, and then suddenly this thought came into my head of like, I've got a sore leg. And I remember thinking, I don't have a sore leg. So this thought had come from nowhere. And so I was kind of curious, because I knew it wasn't my thought. And then I looked around, and this cat was just sat there in the corner, and it was just staring at me. And I kind of looked, and I was like, oh my God, is that cat talking to me? And it's like, I've got a sore leg. It came in again. I've got a sore leg, and it's connected to a past life. So can you please clear the past life? Mm-hmm. So my teacher, my angelic Reiki teacher, came back in, and I said, has your cat got a sore leg? And she said, yeah, he's been limping. And I was like, all right, okay. So then this cat then proceeded to tell me about this past life that it had. And yeah, so I did a process to clear the past life energy, which I've kind of learned how to do through my journey. And yeah, and then my teacher reported that the cat stopped limping. But that was the first experience that I'd had where I received the thoughts of the animal as like words in my mind, and yeah, not really realizing where that came from. But I mean, since then, obviously, I've kind of trained in that and read lots of books on that, and you know, now I receive information in lots of different ways from the animals. So they'll send me information through pictures, words, feelings. So when I'm connecting with an animal now, I kind of they almost give me everything at once. So I'll feel the emotion they're feeling, feel what's going on in their physical body. They'll be sending me images, but they'll be sending me words as well. So I kind of receive it as everything. I communicate with all different animals. So obviously the most common ones are cats and dogs, because that's what people have as pets. I've communicated with horses, and I also communicate with wild animals as well. But yeah, the most common are what people normally have for pets. And I've also communicated with my own animals as well. So my last cat was an amazing communicator. She could be quite brutal in the communication sometimes with the things that she told me. But yeah, she was amazing. Yeah. So yeah, what kind of, yeah, I'm just trying to think of an example of an animal that what it's communicated to me.
So we could use my cat, Zeusy. So this is an amazing story, and you posted this on your wall. And I guess as a typical owner, sometimes, you know, my cat Zeus was talking more than normal, I guess you could say. So he's a very clear communicator, in his voice that we hear is a meow, I guess you could say. And actually, we have 2 really good stories that you've helped me with, but we'll just talk to one. So the most recent one, it was just one that you posted about, was me turning on the heater, and he had, you know, sprayed on the heater, and just the smell was so incredibly intense. But you know, and he did it a couple of times, and he did it in both my room and my daughter's room with a similar type of heater. And it was getting to the point where I think we were even just chatting. I'm not sure I actually called you directly about this, and then ended up having a session with you to talk with Zeus through that. But and as you were talking to him, he basically was trying to communicate that there was a faulty electrical fault with the heater, and that was his only way he could get me to get the heaters outside, which was working very well. But that's just exactly, you know, how we can miss the communication from them. And, you know, I know myself, I can sit down and probably communicate with him, but it's just not something that I put that energy into, which I probably should. But, you know, I think even with animals, after coming back from your animal communication course, my cats are way more vocal, like really way more attentive, more likely to follow me around, because I'm pretty sure they could pick up that I should, hey, you know, you've done this, you need to be communicating with us more. So yeah, I'm getting a little bit better with it, but it's something I probably need to focus on. But that's a story close to me, I guess, that
and I think with Zeus, you know, he was a great example of sometimes the behavior is really inconvenient to the owner. So for you were like almost pulling your hair out, like, why is my cat peeing on the heater kind of thing? And actually the animal's doing you a favor. So that's a really good example of the cat's just like, hey, that heater's not good for your health, it's faulty, you need to take it outside. Animals are often acting in a way to bring something up for their owner. So, you know, the owner might see it as a massive inconvenience to them, but the animal it's like they're always trying to assist us. So they're always trying to bring something to our attention. So sometimes, you know, if someone's got an anxious animal, for example, sometimes they can actually be absorbing the anxiety of the owner and then reflecting it back to them. And then the owner goes, oh, I've got an anxious pet. But actually the animal's taking the anxiety from their owner. So, you know, when people call me out for healings, in particular, you know, I do animal communication and healing sessions, and they'll call me out and they'll say, this is what's wrong with my animal. And then I speak to the animal and it's almost like, this is what's wrong with my owner, you know. It's like, it's not about me. So a lot of the time animals are kind of taking things from their owner, to assist their owner. So when I go, I actually end up facilitating a session for the owner to release what's going on for them, and then the animal can stop reflecting it back. So yeah, they're always assisting us on our path, you know. They reincarnate with us for a reason, and whether that's to help us through a difficult phase of our life, or to really show us something about ourselves, or also to bring up past life memories as well, because we reincarnate with our animals over and over again, and sometimes they'll act in a certain way to bring attention to a past life energy and be like, hey, do you remember when we reincarnated together before and this happened? And they'll just keep bringing that energy up until you actually pay attention and release whatever it is that you're holding on to around that. So they're such a gift to us. They're always assisting us in our lives, and they're just absolutely amazing. So even when it looks like they're being bad, that they're doing it for us, you know. What they're doing is for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And have you had any experiences, what would be really interesting if you have, around the connection of like maybe an animal and a child with some of the things that you've done? Or is it normally like a more of an adult sort of owner? Just curious, really. So I know with Lily,
I guess the younger children usually have, you know, they've not necessarily bought into the programming yet, so there's not any
that's true
kind of issues when they're younger. So yeah, I'm trying to think of an example with a child. I usually find it's the adult owners that there's generally more of something to work through with, but you know, I do find that animals have soul contracts with children as well. So some animals have come in to grow up with the child, to be that support person. So I know for myself, when I was a young child, I had a rabbit, it was called Frisky, and he was really my support animal. So when I was upset, or like if my parents were arguing, I would go outside and hug the rabbit, and he was that being that was there for me when I felt really alone and needed someone to kind of connect with. That's who he was for me. So you know, children and animals do have soul contracts. I'm sure your daughter's got soul contracts with your cats, you know, particularly Theo. They're very, very close. So there's such strong soul contracts there. And then for animals as well, when it comes time for them to go, that they've got no attachment to that. They're completely like, they can really embrace when their soul contract's finished and they're ready to leave the body. Yeah,
which is also a really good one to talk to children about as well. And I've spoken to Lily about that with Theo, because as you mentioned, they're very, very close, and they've had, you know, past lives together where they've been very close as humans in a past life, you know, and that's just incredible. That kind of one of the lives that I know about, which I think I did with you, was one with Theo, Zeus, myself, and Lily's dad, and my two cats who are brothers now were brothers in that past life as well. And Theo in a relationship, it sounds weird as the cats now, but Theo,
I remember now. I do remember
Theo in a relationship with Lily.
So they're really close, those two.
Really close. And you know, Theo just follows Lily around from morning to night, basically. That's how I know she's awake sometimes, is he gets up off his bed and walks towards her door, and then she's waking, you know. It's incredible. Which is awesome. So what about how you feel or didn't feel supported, just maybe even with friends or family, or as you were coming through the gifts? Were you fortunate enough to know people that were experiencing things similar to you, even, you know, when you were traveling or in the age of sort of 28?
It was interesting when I was traveling. I mean, the girl I traveled with, you know, she was, she still is one of my closest friends, and she was very supportive. And like every day she would wake up and she'd go, what did you dream? You know, she really wanted to to know what I dreamt. And she was the person who gifted me my first crystal as well, interestingly. But then I also had other experiences where I was around people that just didn't understand what I was going through. So, you know, I had some really profound experiences where I was seeing spirit or experiencing these huge energy channelings. And I remember once I went to a channeling workshop and I actually passed out in the workshop because of the energy that was in there. And I came back to the hostel that I was living in, and the friends that were there were like, you know, why can't you be normal? Why are you so weird? And I remember just feeling like such an outsider, and that nobody got me. So I wasn't traveling with my girlfriend at that point, she'd left. And I just remember feeling really alone, like nobody really understands what I'm going through. You know, I'm having these really weird experiences, but feeling like no one could really explain to me what was happening, which was why I started reaching out to all these books about mediums and people who were going through it, because then I could go, oh, I'm experiencing that as well. But what I found was I traveled for 5 years, and I found like the right people would always come into my path at certain points. So I remember once I was in Fiji and I was about to leave this island, and I really hated this island. I was like, I need to get off here. It was actually a lovely island, but I had a real reaction to it. And I was just about to get on the boat to leave the island, and I ended up like going over on my ankle and really injuring my ankle, and I couldn't walk. And they said, you're not going to be able to leave the island today. You're going to have to rest and put your leg up. And so I ended up getting strapped in all these leaves and raising my leg, and just sat on the beach feeling really sorry for myself that I'd injured my ankle. And that day the boat went out, and obviously I wasn't on it. And a new boat came in with new people, and this woman stepped off the boat and she said, what have you done to your ankle? So I told her, and she said, would you like a Reiki session? And I'd never heard of Reiki at this point. And I said, will it hurt? And she said, no, it won't hurt. She said, you know, I'm just going to do some energy work on it. And to be honest, for me, I was like, I've got no idea what this woman's doing. And she did Reiki on me. And afterwards I went and laid down, and I just cried and cried and cried. There was all this grief that was coming out of me that I hadn't been willing to let go of. And you know, I was really upset about my grandma's death. And it was, you know, my friend said, why are you crying? And I said, I'm really upset about my grandma dying. And she said, well, wasn't that years ago? And I was like, yeah, but it was like, it was all coming out in that moment. And the next day, you know, this woman said, how are you feeling? And I said, oh, I'm good, but I just couldn't stop crying about my grandma's death. And she said, yeah, I've had a chat to your grandma under that tree, and your grandma said she's got some messages. And I was like, what do you mean you've been chatting to my grandma? And I was a bit mind blown, really. And she said to me, you do realize you've got some gifts, you know, and I feel like that was a real monumental moment in my travels of someone actually starting to coach me. And she said, you know, I feel like you're very psychic. You've got a lot of gifts. You need to find what it is that works for you, what you feel connected to, which for me is definitely animals. And she said, and, you know, just follow your guidance and see what appears to you. And from that moment, I mean, I spent 3 days with this woman and her husband, and I felt like I learned so much from them. And leaving that island, leaving Fiji, and then going back to Australia, then people would come across my path. So a tarot reader came across my path and told me why I'd come to Australia. And, you know, people would come into my awareness, and they'd be like, oh, I've got this book for you. And they would just hand me a book. I remember walking into a bookshop once, and a complete stranger bought me The Power of Now.
Awesome.
I looked at the book and I was like, oh, I can't afford it. I didn't have $35 at the time. And this person walked up to me in the shop and went, I'm going to buy that book for you. And I was like, who is this person, you know? And this is the kind of thing that would happen. People would just give me things, and it was like the next piece of the puzzle. So it's like this unfolding journey of like, this is the next piece, this is the next piece. And I feel like I'm still living that now of like following my calling, and what's next, you know, what book do I need to read next, or what country do I need to go to next? And it just feels like this kind of like adventure now of following the energy. Yeah.
I love that, and I can relate to that from the short time I've known you. I don't know, over a year or so, I guess, that you still stand really true in that. And that's what I love about, you know, you and your energy, is you're so open to possibilities of what's next, and you really step in to what's presented in front of you, even where I'm sure there's fear there sometimes, or things you need to work through, that whatever that, you know, that resistance can be sometimes. But more and more, I think, even from what I've heard from you talking in our discussions and chats and stuff, you're just there with it. And so it's interesting to hear that story of how much, you know, that's followed you through, and you've just been
drawn to where you've needed to go on the path.
Yeah, and I think when it's meant to be, it just keeps coming up, you know. So I remember one of the very first books I ever read, spiritual books, was the Celestine Prophecy, which is very much about this, you know, following the energy.
Yeah, it is.
My friend had the book, and I read the first chapter, and I was really engrossed in it. And then she kind of took it back because she was about to read it. And then I just kept getting people coming into my life going, "Have you read the Celestine Prophecy?" And I was like, "No." And it just kept happening. "If you read the Celestine Prophecy?" And it was coming over and over again. And I remember one day I was in Melbourne and I walked into this bookstore, and I mean, it's laughable now. It just said, "Today's must read Celestine Prophecy." And I was like, okay, I get it, you know. And I walked through the store just very intuitively, and I stopped in front of a shelf, and it said there, the book was right there in front of me, like I just found it, and it said Celestine Prophecy. And it was another time in my life when I didn't have a lot of money, and I picked it up, and it said $35. And I was like, I think I had like $35 in my bank account at the time. And I just said to the universe, if you want me to read this book, you need to bring it to me for cheaper than $35. And I put it back on the shelf, and I walked out of the store. And the next week, I don't know, it was a few weeks later, a while later, I went to a market. And I'd got there late, and all the stalls were closing. There's only one stall left open in the middle of the market, and it was a bookstall.
Awesome.
And I was like, the book's going to be there. And I just walked over, and I picked up the first book on the table, and right there underneath it was the Celestine Prophecy for $12. And I had $12, so I bought it. But I just love that like, if you need to read something, or you know, get a message, it just keeps coming back. It's just it's just like pay attention, because the signs are there, you know. And then reading that book really changed the way I think about life, and following the energy, and that's exactly what the book's about, actually. So
yeah, exactly. I love that story. Love it a lot. And, you know, and it's a great lesson. I love that lesson as well. And because as I've been talking to you, one of the questions that I'd really love to ask and explore with you is around, like, what advice would you give someone who was younger, like, you know, maybe someone who was in their early 20s or even a teenager, around how, you know, I guess I was about to say, you know, how they can kind of step more into their gifts, or feel comfortable doing that. But I mean, you do tend to find the path and the people, and I've experienced that as well, people coming in at certain times, and with different modalities, and even something as, you know, as simple as working with crystals or that kind of stuff. But, you know, what do you think may have helped you, or advice would you give to someone who is feeling a little bit like a outlier, or someone who is feeling a bit apprehensive around their gifts, or I guess, and maybe more things that they can do within themselves, you know, that self-work, that looking inward, or some guidance? I mean, they may be getting these messages themselves, but feeling overwhelmed with what they're receiving. Yeah, just anything that maybe comes to mind around that.
I mean, the thing that jumps to mind is to pay attention to the signs, because, like I say, for me, like the Celestine Prophecy, like all these people were just walking into my life going, read the Celestine Prophecy, like it was on the signs, it was everywhere. So it's like, listen to those signs, and the sign might be taking you to someone who can mentor you or guide you on your path. Because I think when we first open up to our abilities, and this was definitely the case for me, it can be very overwhelming. So when I first started seeing spirits, it wasn't comfortable for me. You know, I remember there's a couple of experiences I'll share with you. One was when I was living in a hostel, and I had my own room, and every night I felt like there was a man stood in the corner of my room. And I'd kind of lie in bed, and I had this awareness of him just looking at me, and I was like, oh my God, he's staring at me. And I would tell other people, and they're like, don't be stupid, there's no one in your room, you know. So everyone just kind of dismissed what I was seeing. And then one day the hostel owner approached me, and it turns out she was very psychic as well. And she said, I just want to say to you that the man that you're seeing in your room, he actually passed away in the room next door to the room you're sleeping in. So he actually died at the hostel. And she said he is apologizing that he is scaring you by being in your room, but he really loves your energy, and he would like to connect with you. But she said, if you don't like it, then you can tell him to leave. So it's remembering that we've got free will as well. So
exactly,
if we don't want these spirits in our room, then we say, you're not welcome here, please leave. You know, you've got the right to say that. And I remember being stood in my room after she said it, and, you know, she told me a lot about him, and it really made me think, wow, I wasn't making any of that up. I thought I was making it up, and then she just really validated it. And yeah, I remember being back in my room and I could feel him again, and I was like, I'm sorry, can you please go? Because I just wasn't ready to deal with his energy. I just didn't know what to do with him. But that was a real kind of, that experience gave me the awareness that I wasn't making it up in my head, because I thought I was just making it all up. Thought I was kind of going a bit crazy. And then the second experience I had was when I moved back into my mum's house when I got back from traveling, and I kept feeling like there was a man following me around the house. And then when I went to sleep, he would come to me in my dreams and say, my name's Michael. And he just kept saying it over again, my name's Michael. And I kept waking up and saying to my mum, do we know anyone who's passed over called Michael? Because this guy is like following me over and over again, coming into my dreams, like he's not leaving me alone. And, you know, I kept asking, she's like, don't know anyone called Michael, don't know anyone called Michael. And then one day that this guy had been like really harassing me in my dreams, I woke up in the morning and I just went, Mum, who's Michael? And my mum's face just dropped, like she'd had the awareness, and she just went, oh my God, Michael's the guy who owned the house before we did, and he died. And when she told me, I just burst into tears, because it was like this validation of like, wow, this information I'm getting is correct. Like, I'm not making this up. So yeah, I feel like, you know, I had those experiences to really make me understand that my gifts were real. So yeah, you know, if people are going through their own experiences, because having your gifts awakening can be uncomfortable, maybe there's people around you that don't understand what's going on, then yeah, following the signs that guide you where you need to be, whether that's to read a certain book or to connect with someone who is a bit further ahead of you on the journey and can turn around and go, oh yeah, I've been through all that and I understand where you're coming from, and now I can support you through that. I did have that in certain stages of my own journey, but just not all the time. So yeah, that would be my biggest advice, really, and to start seeking like-minded people, because yeah, it's not going to be everyone's thing. And you know, people listening to this will, you know, have different gifts to me as well. So finding the people that really resonate for you, and to find that support group, whether that's yeah, going to a circle or something, or yeah, reaching out to different people.
Yeah, exactly. Especially with social media these days, it's quite a lot easier to connect with different groups, and you can either go along to stuff and sometimes it doesn't feel right, and you go along to others and it does. I guess for me too, as you were talking, I was thinking I have a lot of, you know, for me it's like the strengths come in each day. So it's the awareness of when I get up in the morning, like my clear audience might be, you know, something will happen, I'll be like, oh, okay. And then throughout the day, all my signs are to do with that modality. Or like I'll be driving into the city or wherever, and I'll see a signpost, and I'm like, right, it's going to be like this all day. And then I see all these signs, and it's been really fun to tune into all those different things, because it changes for me personally in my journey on a different day. Like there's different things on different days that are really strong. But it's normally just one thing, you know, and it's fun for me now, because I've learned to embrace, instead of getting frustrated that I'm not really yet, I guess, powerful in one. I'm a broad range of, you know, a lot, but it's fun to play with that for me. And a part of it is accepting that we're all different, right? Because I think part of my frustration was seeing what other people could do and almost feeling a little bit resentful that I wasn't where they were. But actually, as soon as you learn to embrace who you are, and the sooner you can do that, I think, especially if you're younger, to really just embrace the things that are happening for you, and the gifts that are coming through for you is really important, instead of always looking at comparison to others, I guess, is where I'm going with that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the biggest advice I give to anyone is to really trust yourself. So, you know, for me, if I'm getting guidance, then it's often just coming in my own voice into my head. So it just sounds like you're kind of talking to yourself, but that's how my guidance comes through. And sometimes even now I'll dismiss it and go, oh, that's not correct. So say, for example, not that long ago, I was heading out of the door and I got the message, take your swimming costume. And I was like, I don't need my swimming costume. I think I was going to the shop or something. I was like, I don't need my swimming costume. So I dismissed it. And then I ran into a friend and they were like, hey, we're off to the hot pools. Do you want to come? Now, if I'd have listened to my guidance, I would have had my swimming costume and I could have gone to the hot pools. But because I dismissed it, I didn't have my swimming costume. And I also had an experience where I paid a bit of a bigger price when I went out and my guide said, someone's going to steal your wallet tonight. So you need to take your credit cards out of your wallet. And I was like, oh, that's not going to happen. And that night I got my wallet stolen. So, and I didn't take my cards out. So I paid a big price there in not listening to my own intuition. So yeah, I mean, now I do listen. Of course, there's times when I just go, oh, no. But in general, I'm much better at listening to the guidance that I'm getting. And so even if you feel like you're making it up, just really trust whatever's coming to you in that moment. Yeah, and the more you do that, and the more you really learn to trust your own inner guidance, to, you know, whether that's just a thought or a flash of an image, the stronger it gets, you know, the more consistent that information can come through, because you're actually acknowledging it as your truth.
Exactly. Yeah. That's so important. So important. Awesome. Rebecca, is there anything else you want to chat about, or that anything that's coming through to you that you might feel is useful?
I mean, I love everything I do. You know, I love the past life work. I really love. I think it's really, really powerful, like who we've been in past lives. And, you know, we can bring through things from past lives that do hold us back in our life today. So I really encourage people to delve into past life work. I found that really, really powerful on my own journey to, you know, if certain things have happened in past lives, when we reincarnate in this life, we can bring through fears or beliefs or limited points of view. And through past life exploration, you can let go of those points of view or those, you know, physical dis-ease in your body. So I found that a really powerful part of my journey, and also combining it with the animal communication and seeing like who our animals have been to us before. So like even when we've been working together with you and Zeus and Theo, and seeing like how you've all been connected together before, and Lily. Yeah, I just find it so fascinating. But yeah, I mean, with regards to the animals, just feel like they are such a gift to us. And like I say, even if it looks like they're misbehaving or they're doing something that's undesirable for you, they're often trying to bring attention to something. And animals as well often act like their owners. So be aware of how you describe your animals to people. So you know, I've had people say, oh, this is my cat, she hates people. But then I can observe that quality in the person who said it. Or I literally met a dog the other day that was like running up and down frantically. And the owner said to me, oh, she never stops. She doesn't know how to rest. And the woman was like digging the garden up at the time. And I was thinking, oh, that's because you don't know how to rest. So our animals are often reflecting back those parts of us that maybe we're not recognizing in ourselves. So yeah, they're such a huge gift to us. But for anyone who is really interested in speaking to animals, I just want everyone to know that it's not something that I alone can do. It. I'm not special in regards that I speak to animals. We can all speak to animals, and particularly children are very gifted at speaking to animals. So yeah, I'll just share a little tip on how to start speaking to animals, because I think it's really good for people. One of the easiest ways to communicate with animals is through pictures. So imagining a picture in your mind and kind of transmitting that picture to, was that your cat then? Yeah, just agreeing with me. Transmitting that picture to the animal. So I actually did this with a dog the other day. I was kind of having a little play myself, and this dog came over and it was looking at me, and I said, what are you doing? And it said, I'm looking for food. And I said, if you sit down, I'll give you some food. And it just sat, and I just sent the image of like the dog sitting down and me handing it food, and it did it immediately. And I was like, wow, okay. So I gave it the food, and then it, you know, just gave it a little snack. And then it was like, you know, I could tell it wanted more food. So I gave it the image of, if you lie down, so I wasn't speaking at all. If you lie down, I'll give you more food. And the dog just immediately dropped to the floor. And so I gave it some more food, and then I was like, right, I'm not giving you any more now. But just the simple act of actually sending the picture. So, you know, you can try this with your dog, for example, if you're about to walk your dog, rather than saying, hey, do you want to go for a walk? Is just call the animal's name in your mind and show it the lead, or maybe show it going out through the forest. and just observe how your dog responds. Because I did that with the dog here yesterday. I just telepathically called her and said, do you want to go for a walk? And she was there straight away.
Yeah.
You know? So, you know, you can do it with your cats, you know, jump up on the table and I'll give you a treat, but you're giving them the image of what you want them to do. And also don't tell them what you don't want them to do, because they're not going to get that you don't want them to do it. They're going to think that you want them to do that. So for example, if you've got a dog that keeps jumping up, don't say, don't jump up, because the dog will just hear jump up. What you want to say is, please keep all 4 feet on the floor, and give the dog the image of all 4 paws on the floor. And that's how the animals communicate with us. So, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a good place to start, just by sending pictures.
Yeah.
And then animals will send pictures back, but the trick is to actually quieten your mind enough to listen to what they're saying back. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. As you were talking, a story came to mind that you shared with me around ants.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really incredible, because when it's not just, you know, we often go to cats and dogs or domestic.
Yeah, I know you can communicate to insects.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll share that story because it is an amazing story. I've gone around to my friend's house. She was having problems with an ant colony in her bathroom, and she said, oh, you know, I want to get rid of these ants. And I've never ever communicated to insects before at this point. And she said, oh, I'm going to get some of the chemical stuff, you know, where you spray it all and then they all die. So I said, okay, I'll just try and communicate with them. So when you've got something that's like ants, you know, there's hundreds of thousands of them, you can't just communicate to one, you need to communicate to them as a mass consciousness. So I just imagine that all these ants like combine to like one giant ant. And then I said, I want to communicate with the consciousness of these ants, please. And I just said to them, if you stay here, you're going to die. And I gave them this vision of like all the ants like burning in flames and everyone was going to die. It was a very dramatic image, but I was trying to really strongly convey that they shouldn't stay here. And I said to my friend, is there a place that you would be happy for them to live that wouldn't disturb you? And she said, yeah, they can live in the compost bin, which is in the garden. And I said, how do they get there? So she said, oh, they go out the window, down the wall and across the path. So then I gave the ants the image. I said, so I have my eyes shut. I'm always, you know, communicate with my eyes shut. I said, if you go to the compost bin, you can live there happily. So I showed them the way in my mind, like out of the window, down the wall, across the path. And then I gave them this little vision of them all celebrating and everyone was happy and they lived in the compost bin and it's happy ever after. And I really, you know, gave the feeling of that. And I had my eyes shut and my friend was like, oh my God. And I said, what? And I opened my eyes and all the ants were filing out of the window and across to the compost.
I love it.
The media. And I was like, oh, wow. Didn't know I could do that. But yeah, it's a whole new manner of pest control. So
yeah. And I love that. I love it a lot. Yeah, I had a few ants come in, a couple of them, and I immediately thought of that story with you.
And
you know,
as well to acknowledge that when animals and insects and things show up in our life, they're often bringing a message.
Yeah.
So I had another friend who they was experiencing, I think they had 5 or 6 wasp swarms in their garden. And he said, oh, we're just inundated with all these wasps. We can't get rid of them. And I said, have you actually acknowledged the message of wasps? And they said, no, I didn't know that was a thing. So I said, if you know, there's a really good website, I think it's called spiritanimals.com. And you can type in the animal and it gives you the message of the animal. So I typed it in for them and they read the message and it was really spot on for what was going on in their life. And I said, if you acknowledge the message of wasp, they don't need to keep coming into your life and annoying you. And the next time I saw him, he said all of the wasp swarms went. After him and his wife acknowledged the message, they left. So, you know, if ants are showing up in your house or mice, or you keep seeing hedgehogs or whatever's going on, that animal's asking you to acknowledge their message. Because, you know, when we were very connected to nature, when we weren't living in our brick houses or whatever, and we were more connected to nature, those animals would be showing up, giving us messages in our life. So they're still doing that in the way that they can. So yeah. I recommend looking up the message and really truly acknowledging the message that animals bringing to you, and then you might find that they naturally go away anyway.
Yeah, and I love that message. I love that message, how we've almost forgotten how connected we are and still are, you know, and need to be with nature and those signs. And because it's so, you know, often we're in our homes and then something comes in from outside and we see it as something that shouldn't be there, rather than something that's part of.
Yeah, exactly. Because if it keeps showing up, there's a reason for it, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else before we wrap up? I'm just conscious you've got other plans soon, so we'll.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we definitely did a lot of talking about animals, but that's definitely what I'm passionate about. Yeah, I mean, I could just talk about this for hours, you know, all the spirits and energy and everything. Like, it's something that I'm really, really passionate about. But yeah, but maybe that's enough for today. Maybe we've filled people's brains with enough information.
Rebecca, how can people learn more about what it is that you do?
I do have a website, so my website's rebeccagambles.com, and I do have 2 Facebook pages as well. My business is called Heavenly Connections, so I've got a Facebook page called Heavenly Connections, and I do have an animal communicator page as well. So I do share stories of things that animals have said to me, or healings I've done for animals and their owners. So yeah, people are welcome to follow me on my Facebook pages or take a look at my website. Yeah, those are the 2 best places to find me. And I have a mailing list if anybody wants to subscribe. I don't really send that many emails out, but when I'm offering something like a course, like an online course or in person, then I'll send details out about that.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So Rebecca, thank you so much for being on the channel. It's always great to talk to you. And I'm sure people will find that really, really useful. Your messages are, you know, really powerful. And I just love all the stories around the animals as well. So maybe we could do another one just on the animals.
I could definitely talk for hours about the different things.
That would be awesome. Awesome. So thank you so much, and we'll talk soon.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.